Welcome everyone to another episode of Price Targets with your host Bitcoin Jack. If you've watched the last video, we can see that pretty much the levels I outlined got nuked. The P&L on that one wasn't pretty. We're going to talk about that a little bit later and see if we can make something sensible of the market right here. First, I want to have your attention for ECOS. They're sponsoring this video. They're a new exchange, fully regulatory compliant, owned by a Nasdaq listed company. They're having fees off for the month of January, so the link is in the watermark and in the description below, so make sure you check them out. I have to congratulate them for raising 38 million in a private placement last week, securing their plans for long-term growth, expanding the ecosystem. You can trade futures, spot, there's a fiat on-ramp, and you can deposit and withdraw USDC stablecoins. So check them out. They're a really nice, cool new exchange, and they're looking for long-term growth and expanding their reach. That said, thank you ECOS for sponsoring, and let's dive in. I want to start with marking out how much volume we've seen. So we're going to go back to the chart of Sunday before the major nuke and talk about what went wrong. But first, I want to show you this. This is the long-term chart of Bitcoin, and I have this indicator, the Bitwise Spot Volume Index. It's an aggregate of spot pairs on Euro, USD, USDC, USDT of exchanges that I think and that Bitwise deemed to be legitimate volumes. So Binance, Phoenix. Let's see, I can show you. Kraken, Bitstamp, Coinbase, Gemini, FTX. Well, FTX wasn't in the list, obviously, but I added it because I kind of know they're legit. And the Mt. Gox pairs are in here as well. Obviously, you can't watch the chart anymore, but the data feed is still in TradingView. So up until when the data feed kind of went dead after the hack, etc., that volume is aggregated into this metric too. And it's an estimate. It's not exactly the amount of Bitcoins, because not all these data feeds give the amount of Bitcoins. So then I have to calculate dollars with the price to the amount of Bitcoins. So it's not 100% accurate, but it's as accurate as it gets, and it's a nice way to see how the market-wide spot volume is behaving, which, in my opinion, is a very important metric to gauge the strength of a trend and or reversal. So we can see here, and I hope it's visible on the video. This is one of the reasons why I don't like to live stream, because sometimes the quality drops, and doing it this way, I make sure it's absolutely crisp once the HD version is uploaded. So please watch this on 1080p. You can see the peak here. A lot of volume. We had more volume in March, which obviously was the giant capitulation before this bull run, and I mean, we've matched it in the dump of 2013, where we dumped like 80% in, I don't know, a day or 2 days. There were two days with a lot of volume, and there was a lot of volume on this high right here. And then during the bull run of 2017, there was a lot of volume on this dump right here, which respected the market structure quite nicely back then. And then obviously there became more volume in the dump here in December 2017, where we had a little last dead cat bounce before really correcting the larger portion of the bear market back then. So whether this is bullish or bearish, that remains to be seen. But what we know is that if price can manage to regain what it has lost, then there was a lot of selling and a lot of folks absorbing, buying the price. So if we can go higher, it really sets a very dramatic price floor, almost kind of like dictating fair price for Bitcoin, because there was a lot of Bitcoins traded here. So there was a lot of interest to sell, but obviously that means for every seller there's a buyer. If the market is not going to dump any further and make new highs, that's an amazing show of strength in terms of volume. And the more volume you have on continuation, the stronger the market is. So that remains to be seen. We cannot say whether it's bearish or bullish, but it's very interesting and something to keep in the back of our minds. So now we've seen that, let's hop to the Bitcoin chart and talk about what went wrong. Still looking at the daily. If you've watched the previous video, I was really convinced that 36K would hold. Obviously, it nuked straight through it. It had some support right here. And if we look at derivatives, we can see a lot of people went long here. They paid like a giant premium at some point. And it was scary, you know, like my P&L was not pretty on this. And I tried to manage and reduce the pain a little bit, and but still lost quite a bit of money on it. And then the next level, if you've been on Twitter, I've been actively tweeting during this dump, during all this pain on how to manage it. I kind of like hedged myself a little bit, and then obviously I unhedged myself as this held. This daily structure is super important. If we lose it, I don't know what's going to happen, but that means that all the selling that happened here was just incredibly bearish, and that we're going to see downside continuation. But for now, it's holding, and it's kind of in this low time frame consolidation that I want to see resolve before going big in one direction or the other. But it doesn't look that bad. I think it's just in a no trade zone. If you have the balls, you can, you know, get an aggressive long or an aggressive short in this range. I'm going to take a sip of coffee. We're going to talk about ETH as well in a little bit. Just ETH BTC. So let me remove this for a bit. So 36 got nuked. It's resistance now. If we look at the 4 hour, we kind of see that we're inside a bit of a range right here. What I'm worried about that could potentially happen is that price wants to revisit this low right here. Although it would make me, you know, unhappy to say the least, and B, it would just be deep. It would be well within parameters that we've seen in previous bear markets. Obviously, it's 35%, so it's definitely possible. But this was a large retest, and you can see here the volume here was also quite high. So it would, you know, this should be a quite strong floor for now. But it's kind of like the place where I'm feeling scared to really say it's not going there. It can. Is it gonna happen? I'm not counting on it yet. If we look further down into the hourly, we could make the argument that this is some kind of Adam and Eve, or some kind of like inverse head and shoulders where the right shoulder is kind of slow. and long drawn out. That's kind of like what an Adam and Eve is. But then this would be the left shoulder, the head, and then the right shoulder. They're both kind of very similar. Sometimes, like in Adam and Eve, doesn't have this part here, which makes it kind of just like the V and then the rounded bottom. And now we have this kind of like little V before this one, so inverse head and shoulders would make it count too. The other thing that I want to point out is that, and I'm not sure if I can show it to you on this chart, but generally in bull markets, when you have dumps like this, we can measure it from where the dump started, or if you prefer, we can measure it from up here. What we can see is during most major sell-offs in 2013, in 2017, during bull markets, it would be coin fissures on a high volume, and sometimes it would just run it back turbo, like straight away. We didn't, but what you usually see is that this area should hold after the major sell-off, and then it kind of runs it back either slow or at some point really fast. So that's kind of like the bullish hopium we have right here. It makes a lot of sense to bet in this area. It's probably not going to get there anymore if this chart is bullish, but this area, this entire zone, if you want to make a high time frame trade, in my opinion, is where you get in, and the invalidation would be kind of below here, and that's if you believe that price can, continue to the targets that were mentioned in the previous video and still in this chart. I honestly think that, if you manage to break out of this consolidation right here, it's going to get up here. If it can get past it, make new highs, then it's easily going to go towards 46 at least. So to the downside, the target would probably be around 27, around this wick right here. This wick was $27,650. So that's kind of it. Like, I can zoom in onto the super low retarded time frames, and you're gonna pretty much see the same. The support has to be, for this to remain bullish, in my opinion, has to be in this region right here. Anywhere below it, it's kind of, it's not holding within bullish territory. So ideally, this holds. It could come out. It could come back down all the way here. So then you would probably just come down here, beep 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 beep, and then that's kind of where you could really make the best risk reward ratio bet. We'll have to see whether that works out. That said, I'm in spot exposure, not hedged anymore, and if we can see this breakout and form some strength, I think I'm gonna start building leverage exposure and see where it can end up. So that's Bitcoin. ETH BTC, kind of missed it on the last video, like that. It's kind of in this weird situation. In my opinion, this could very well be one of the largest inverse head and shoulders I've seen in crypto. Left shoulder, head, right shoulder to form, which hasn't confirmed yet. And basically, if that kind of breaks out, it's probably going to double its range. If we have to count that in a logarithmic scale, we can kind of measure it from up down here. And we would place the 0.5 around there. So that's a ridiculously high target. That's logarithmically. We could use a linear one, and that would put us here. And that kind of fits with the channel we're seeing here, and the well, you could say this is a Livermore cylinder, or like a like expanding, like ascending broadening wedge. Generally what these kind of do is bounce, 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 and then eventually bounce to the upside diagonal. And if we zoom out a little bit, there's a lot of confluence for that area, as it's also kind of the flip-flop level here, and kind of where we lost support back in August 2018. And this entire area, it's empty. Like, there's not a lot of trading history in there. Obviously there is some here, but so far back that it's just less relevant. So we could kind of call this a gap or an inefficiency. So we got to zoom in a little bit, I guess. We have this level. So this is kind of like where we lost support into this fake out on the daily. There's not a lot of kind of weird things going on here. And this is the order block that we're looking at. So ideally, to get a long in, you wait for price to either get here. You could get a long in here, but then you got to be cautious. You know, are you going to just rate this wick, or are you going to fill this entire inefficiency that's right there? I've been in since this green line, and I took half profits on the entire position, and I'm holding on to the rest. Like, I'm fine with the slow play on ETH BTC. These three lines here are kind of the resistance that I think are really important. I think if you rate this high right here, you want to buy any pullback, and then price is going to open itself up to eventually reach into this resistance at 0.05, 0.06-ish. That would be a really bullish scenario, and I'm not really sure like if that's going to happen with Bitcoin roaring. So maybe Bitcoin needs to sell off for that scenario, and then it's not the biggest alpha play. I think that's it. You know, like, I want to talk about Litecoin, but it's been looking like absolutely dog shit. I think I've like put a few charts on Twitter that kind of contain what I want to see before I want to get in, which was an upside break, and it just didn't manage to reach it and sold off again. So maybe next weekend we can look into that, and whether it looks better or not. But it's just not been performing the way I want, and I think it's very important just to, you know, like, bet on the best performance. And obviously ETH has shown some signs of life here, kind of like engulfing this entire range. It would make sense for this to come down a little bit, but if it does, then this zone right here on this bullish order block is kind of the place where I'd place a bet. Thanks for watching. Thanks to eCause once more. The link is down below in the description. If you like this video, give a thumbs up, and I'll catch you on Sunday. Cheers.